But first, let's analyse this mess at the BBC. If you missed it during the show yesterday, Emily Maitlis has been admonished by bosses at the corporation for what was a blatantly left-wing rant. Even they weren't able to cover up for this. Have a listen to what she said on the show 2 nights ago about Dominic Cummings.
Tell us he worked within them, the more angry the response to this scandal is likely to be. He was the man, remember, who always got the public mood, who tagged the lazy label of elite on those who disagreed. He should understand that public mood now, one of fury, contempt and anguish. He made those who struggle to keep to the rules feel like fools and has allowed many more to assume they can now flout them. The Prime Minister knows all this, but despite the resignation of one minister, growing unease from his backbenchers, a dramatic early warning from the polls and a deep national disquiet, Boris Johnson has chosen to ignore it. Tonight we consider what this blind loyalty tells us about the workings of Number 10. We do not expect to be joined by a government minister.
Sounds almost like my monologue, doesn't it? But remember, this is the woman who is paid by us to present impartial coverage on election nights. While Rod Liddle, the journalist, Sun columnist and associate editor at The Spectator, has had his own run-ins with Ms. Maitlis. He joins me now alongside Paul Connew, a columnist at The New European who supports Emily Maitlis. Rod, you obviously received an apology from the BBC last year over an interview involving Ms. Maitlis. So I guess what happened last night didn't surprise you.
Well, it kind of did surprise me a bit because the apology I got, and they're incredibly rare. I mean, they're like four-leaf clovers. You just don't get apologies from the BBC. But there was a kind of outpouring of annoyance at the sheer level of vituperation, bias, and partial behaviour that she displayed in that interview, that even the BBC was forced to conclude that she had been bullying, had allowed her personal animosity to get in the way of a fair interview, and that it had been revealed that her own political position was easy to see. And the action they said that must be taken wasn't much action. It was that Newsnight should endeavour to ensure that this never happens again.
Mm. And now it has.
It has. So, I think this one was more egregious than the one where I copped it, because I think the editor has something to answer for, because quite clearly, in the case where it was me, it was just her ranting at me like a kind of deranged fishwife for 4 minutes, and I don't think the editor would have known exactly what she was going to say. But the opening monologue to Newsnight is something which must surely be read by an editor. Certainly, if I was at the Today programme, I would write the cues myself.
Well, of course, because in case any of our listeners don't know, you were, of course, the former editor of the Today programme on Radio 4. And the BBC, for all of its faults, Rod, it does have... It's swimming in staff, it's swimming in executives. Presenters aren't just able to go on and make a rant, are they? Emily Maitlis would have had to check this all out.
Yes, it would have been checked out. It's inconceivable that the top of the programme wouldn't have been seen by the editor. And that editor, did nothing last time it happened, has done nothing at other complaints which have come in about Emily, and is going to do nothing, I assume, about this one either. So it just goes on. I mean, we'll see if Ofcom pick it up, which they may well indeed do.
Yet Emily Maitlis is hero worshipped at the BBC, Rod. She is viewed as one of their star presenters. Do you feel after this that viewers will ever be able to take her seriously as an impartial news presenter again?
I don't think people take her seriously as an impartial news presenter now. I mean, she is a hero, but she's a hero amongst people who believe the same things that she believes within that rather agreeable metropolitan bubble in which she lives.
Although, for example, her interview with Prince Andrew was brilliant, wasn't it?
Good interview, very good interview. And truth be told, if that broadside which she delivered had been published in the New European, an excellent newspaper, by the way, or the Daily Mirror, or the Sun, or wherever, I would have thought, yes, that's not a bad piece. I disagree with it, but largely, though not entirely. it would have been fine. But that's not what she's there for. And it's not me saying this. It's the BBC saying this. The BBC has admitted it wasn't Dominic Cummings who broke the rules, it was Emily Maitlis.
And something has obviously gone on behind the scenes, Rod, because she was due to be presenting last night's show. She was replaced at the last minute. She tweeted at 2:30 a.m. saying it was my choice not to be in the hot seat. I presume, Rod, she is utterly furious because in her mind, her bosses have just thrown her to the wolves.
Well, they've hardly thrown it to the wolves. This is the BBC and there are no wolves. You know, if it was a commercial organisation, there might be wolves, but not at the BBC. They carry on doing whatever they want to do. I think you're right. I think she had a hissy fit and stormed off. But, you know, it's been there. It's been signalled for a very long time that she betrays bias in everything she says. Now, you know, I have other experience of this in that I was sacked from the BBC for displaying bias, and they were quite right.
But that was for something that you wrote.
It was for something that I wrote in a newspaper, so I didn't even broadcast it on the BBC. It was a personal view expressed somewhere else, which was a fairly left-wing personal view, it has to be said, about fox hunting and the people who do fox hunting. But they were right then. Why aren't they right now? Why don't they either get rid of her or make it absolutely clear that this is acceptable and will not continue?
Let me bring Paul Connew in, the columnist at the left-wing newspaper, The New European. Paul, how do you justify what Emily Maitlis did last night?
Well, first of all, I think Rod might be interested in the fact that there's a petition in support of Emily Maitlis heading towards 100,000 now, I think.
Oh, they're irrelevant. Those petitions are irrelevant. They're driven by the Twitter. They're driven by the Twitter pitchfork mob.
Rod's old colleague, famous colleague from the Today programme, John Humphreys, is among the signatories. But anyway, we'll move on from that. No, I mean, as somebody who's also edited radio programmes, in fact, for talk radio, in fact, a few years ago, let me just say one thing. I do agree with Rod to a tiny point. I mean, if I'd been editing Newsnight, I would have just slightly changed, if I'd seen it, and I would have demanded to see it, I would have changed just a tiny little bit of that intro. I would have said Dominic Cummings broke the rules. The polls showed that the country decided that, and it shocked the government cannot, and then carried on.
Well, he didn't even. There's not even proof he broke the rules, though, Paul. That is a factually incorrect statement. The Durham police have said he might have been. There might have been a minor breach of lockdown rules. There is no breach in terms of his initial journey to Durham. And by the way, Emily Maitlis had no idea if he'd broken the rules or not.
Various lawyers, there's divisions of opinion.
But she stated it as a fact. She stated it as a fact. So you've just disproved your theory.
No, I just said that, in fact, that if you'd said that the country's decided that, because the polls show that people have decided that, a lot of Tory, a surprisingly large number of Tory MPs have decided that too, and you wouldn't expect Durham police to really get involved in the initial journey from London. But the legal arguments are still around over this, because the fig leaf legal position, which might technically make it a non-offence, was not devised for this purpose. That was introduced when it was raised that the children
Paul, do you accept,
in domestic violence situations and who were in danger, should be protected. It wasn't.
Paul,
it
do
wasn't
you
designed
accept
for senior number 10 advisors who hadn't at that stage.
Okay, but you may disagree with what the laws are. You may disagree. That is getting off the point. Do you accept that Emily Maitlis has a left-wing bias?
I don't know Emily. I know Emily Maitlis slightly, but I don't know her political viewpoint. But but the polls show and the MPs' mailboxes show, and I have Tory friends who are disgusted. Some of them are.
That's fine. That's fine, Paul. But is it the role of Emily Maitlis to speak on behalf of the nation? Look, this is what happened when Emily and Rod Liddle had their toe-to-toe last year.
You're delighted that we haven't Brexited yet, and you're delighted that you can get angry about it because that's your currency. You can get everyone up in arms.
But that's what he does. He's an economist. He's an economist.
That's a bit fatuous, isn't it?
That's what you do. You pretty much say that the Remainer argument is that all Leavers are basically racist and xenophobe.
That's
the language you use. Would you describe yourself as a racist? Because many see you that way.
Well, no, obviously not. But I am used to going on BBC programmes and being accused of such things when there's no evidence. When all you do is write about suicide bombers blowing themselves up in Tower Hamlets, or a black Labour MP, Kate Ossamore, saying she only got the job because her skin colour. Do you have to, at every possible juncture, show the BBC's grotesque bias?
And Rod, it was fascinating because despite this apology, I actually did some research today. That clip remains in full on the BBC Newsnight YouTube page. It does not refer to the fact an apology had to be made about that, which feels outrageous to me. And you could hear there a complete lie from Emily Maitlis saying all you write about is suicide bombers. Well, I read your column every week, so that was a complete lie. But I think it's just
I don't think I've written about suicide bombers for over a year. I mean, it's very, very rare. And by and large, she's right. I'm not in favour of suicide bombers. It was the most bizarre occurrence, and I know how it came about. Because I was told after they didn't want me on the programme, and I don't know why. Therefore, they then invited me on the programme. But if I was going to be on the programme, they certainly weren't going to talk about the thing which I was talking about, which was Brexit, and the book I'd written, which cast doubt upon whether we'd ever actually leave properly. They were just going to call me a racist.
So you felt you were set up by Newsnight?
Yes, totally. Yes, without question. Without question.
Well, there are serious problems at this show. Something has to be done about Newsnight, and you understand why after listening to that account from Rod Liddle. He is, of course, a Sun columnist, journalist, associate editor at The Spectator. Before that, Paul Connew, defending Emily Maitlis, a columnist at the left-wing newspaper, The New European.